All righty. To confirm for the record, do I have your permission to record this interview?
You do.
Well, my name is Eric Brown from Middle Tennessee State University, and I want to start off by saying thank you for your service in the United States Army. The purpose of my interview is to gather information from someone who has been in the military and to use this information to help navigate my career path. Your answers will be audio recorded, and the length of the interview will be based on your responses. Due to the sensitivity of the topic, if you feel uncomfortable answering any questions, simply say pass, and we'll move on to the next question. You may also withdraw from the interview at any time. Try to answer the questions directly in order to prevent duplicated responses. If you have any questions, if you don't have any questions, then we can just go ahead and get started with the first couple.
I'm ready if you are.
Awesome. Just for the record, can you state your name?
Name is Victor Ernest Berger.
And I gave a little insight before we started talking about how, thank you for your service, because we do know that you've served in the United States Army. So my first question is going to be, what made you decide to join the Army?
Actually, I think I was influenced by my father's brother, his name was Max Emil Berger. He was in the military. He took me under his wing, and when I was the summer of my sophomore, junior year of high school, and offered me a job at the Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, working in the Command and General Staff College as a janitor. So I got to know him and his family really good. Of course, they're relatives, but still, we hadn't spent much time together because he was also a military guy. And we became really close friends, and I saw what kind of a family relationship he had and how well that the government had treated him. And I knew then that I wanted to join the Army when I got out of school.
Why do you think you decided to join that branch? Was it because of him as well?
Probably so. Actually, as a young child, as an adolescent, I got in trouble. And it was for some foolish stuff due at the age of 15. And I was placed on a probation, and my probation officer was the chief of police of my hometown of Ellenwood, Kansas. So due to that, I got to know him very well. And he talked me also into, he knew my Uncle Max, and he also talked to me about his service in the military. And he actually recommended that I make an application to Annapolis, the academy. Well, I think it's still true to this day, but so he started me on the paperwork, and it was sent to, you had to get a congressman to sign off for you. And my congressman actually signed off for me. And then the Army denied me.
Oh, really?
I got a letter from the Naval Academy, Annapolis, wanting me to join the Navy and go to Annapolis because they accepted my application. And I turned it down and joined the Army about a year after high school because that's what I wanted to be. I didn't want to be a soldier. I didn't want to be a sailor.
Interesting. Now, I know a little bit more about your background than other viewers may know. And I know that you specialize as being a helicopter pilot in the Army. And my next major question for you is, what was it like being specifically deployed as a helicopter pilot?
Well, initially, I was stationed in, once I finished school, we were sent to certain locations and we never did move on to our first assignment. So I made a request to literally go to Vietnam. And not only did I do it once, I did it 3 times, and we were still not without orders. So we sent a friend who was in the same boat with me to his congressman in Washington, D.C. to complain about the treatment that we were getting at Fort Eustis because they weren't telling us anything. This was on a Friday. He came back on a Sunday night. Monday morning, they had us all in formation. We had our orders just that fast.
Wow.
And every one of us that complained did go to Vietnam. So, and when I went to Vietnam, I went over as an enlisted soldier. So, and I started out as a crew chief on a Cobra gunship. And then I did some crewing on a Scout. Then I took over one of the maintenance platoons, became a tech inspector. From tech inspector, then I took over the Clowns. This was as a platoon sergeant for actually hauling troops into fire zones. When I got back out of the service, I actually went to Vietnam 2 years. I volunteered to go back a second year doing the same thing. And then when I left Vietnam, I actually was living with my uncle in California, my Uncle Max. And they were fixing to build me an apartment in the top of their garage. And I had an uncle that was getting married. So I jumped in my car that I had bought in California and drove it home to Kansas and went to his wedding. And as luck would have it, I met your grandmother and never did go back to California. So I managed to stay in California. Sometime after that, I realized how much I enjoyed the military service. I preferred a structured environment, and told your mother that I wanted to go back in, or your grandmother, excuse me, not that she was happy about it, but she did go. I joined the military as a sergeant first class, and they busted my rank down to E6 because I had been out for about 1.5 years, 2 years, something like that. They said if I waited any longer, they were going to have to bust me 2 ranks. So, and they assigned me to Fort Ord, California. From there, it just kept getting better. So your grandmother and I went to government quarters there. Angie was born before we got out there, your mother. And I was pulled out of formation one morning, and there were 2 envelopes for me to open. One of them was an assignment to Athens, Greece, and the other one was my assignment to flight school. So I was in kind of a quandary of what the heck I should do. So I asked a friend of mine who was a test pilot, and he said, "Oh, that's not a problem." He says, "Put your orders for flight school in your suitcase, go to Greece, and once you get to Greece, get settled in." He said, "Then send in the application and accept the flight school." So I literally knew when I was going to be in flight school 2.5 years in advance.
Oh, wow. That's kind of nice.
Spent 29 months in Athens, Greece with your mother, and we came with your grandmother, excuse me, and we came back to Fort Rucker, Alabama, and I started flight school then, and that was in 1977. So I already had 10 years of service already in. I came in 67, actually probably 68 once it was adjusted in August, and the rest is history. I loved every minute of it.
So you had a couple different positions then. In the
Yeah,
Army.
I
Is that
started
what
out
I
as an
was hearing,
enlisted
right?
soldier. I'm sorry?
I said that's what I was hearing, I guess, from you in the beginning, was that you had a couple different positions. I thought before I spoke to you that you kind of had stayed in the same field.
Well, I was always in aviation.
Always
I was
aviation.
always in aviation the whole time.
Okay.
So I started out as what they called a mechanic. Actually, the actual term initially was called a flight engineer, which meant that you were assigned an aircraft, and that's the way the Navy and the Air Force do it too. But theirs is a little bit more specific. When you're assigned an airplane, you're assigned an airplane. The Army, not so much like that. So not only could I was a crew chief, I maintained aircrafts, but I had multiples that I had to take care of. When the AH-1 Cobra gunship came out, then everybody that had that MOS, and that was the top 10% of the class, got to go from what Huey, which is the UH-1 aircraft, which was the workhorse for Vietnam for many years, into the next level of aircraft, which at that time in the 60s was the AH-1 Cobra gunship. So when I graduated from that, that gave me 2 MOSs that I could work in. And when we got the Cobras in country, then those of us that had the MOS were assigned a specific aircraft for a while. So basically what you did was clean it up, gas it up, load it up with armament, and you did get to fly in the front seat every now and then with the pilot, which is where I got my first taste of being behind the controls, was in 1967 in Vietnam.
And is that, I guess, what eventually made you want to become?
Yeah.
pilot?
I didn't really think I had a chance initially. So after 2 years in Vietnam, I was ready for a break. And that's when I went back to Kansas and met your grandmother and realized after being out for about 2 years, I didn't like what was happening in the United States. Of course, it was a pretty rough time then as well.
Mhm.
A lot of dissension about whether we should be in Vietnam or not.
Yep.
And I preferred a structured environment that I had learned in the military, and decided I wanted to go back and stay. And I did that and never looked back after that. So once your grandmother and I left Greece and I went to flight school, my first assignment was back in Kansas. I left Kansas. I joined the Army to get out of Kansas. And my first assignment out of flight school was back to Fort Riley, Kansas. And I literally stayed there 7 years of my 26 and a half years. So,
Wow.
but not
Uh,
all bad. It was still flying assignment, you know.
this next question that I have is, we've kind of answered it a little bit, but yeah, it was more regarding aviation. So were there any other jobs that you considered other than aviation beforehand? If so, what were they? And if not, why not?
Well, initially when I made my application for the United States Army, I was going to be in finance. I figured I would learn a trade that I could capitalize on. We rode a train from St. John, Kansas to Kansas City for my induction physical and my induction into the United States Army. So when we got all the paperwork done and had to go sit down with the recruiter and sign the final paperwork, I was told at that time that they no longer had any military occupational specialties in the finance area available at that time. And they give me the choice. I could turn around and go back home, or I could select another military occupational specialty called an MOS for the Army, and they would allow me to stay in. So they listed a whole bunch of these. And of course, it was Vietnam. We were losing a lot of infantry people. We were losing a lot of aviation people. And those were the two MOSs that they spoke of the most. And one of them, they called you a crew engineer. Well, the term engineer sounded kind of glorious until that's not what we called it when I was in.
Right.
But I made the choice then to stay in the military and go into as a crew engineer on helicopters. And from they sent me to Fort Leavenworth for basic. And from there, I went to Fort Eustis and became an aviation mechanic.
And you typically, you don't know much about anything on that job, about your MOS before you joined, right? You had no, prior experience or knowledge about any.
Not at all. Not at all. Either I wouldn't have had any experience in finance either.
Right.
I probably wasn't very good at balancing my own checkbook back then, but that's about the only extent of my knowledge would have been. But aviation was something that was very interesting. And of course, they show you a lot of movies, and it was something that I thought I could handle and enjoy. And I was kind of mechanically inclined anyway. So it was a pretty good fit, I think.
Okay.
I don't hold anything against the Army for turning me in that direction anyway.
No, I mean, yeah, after all, you did choose it, right?
That's a fact.
This is another broad one, and you can answer however you want to. What would you say to someone interested in joining the Army, regardless of age or status?
Well, something that most people don't realize is that for every opportunity there is as a civilian, we have a counterpart in the U.S. military, be it Army, Air Force, Navy, National Guards, Merchant Marines, that do the exact same thing that civilians do. The Army is basically the largest corporation in America because we have so many people in so many different venues. If we need people that do finances, we need people that are mechanics. We have aviation mechanics. If it's in the civil sector, it's also in the Army. So anybody that's struggling on the outside, meaning as a civilian, I recommend any military service. That's the first thing off the top of my list. I've actually tried to get some of my grandchildren involved. And as you well know, we have a couple of your sisters are in right now.
Mhm.
But I have your Aunt Nikki's son, Nicholas. I've been trying for years to get him to join. He just seemed lost sometimes. And I thought, as I traveled around and was doing aviation simulation, I did, once I got out of the Army, I continued with the Army in the civil sector, doing simulation and aviation. And one of my sites was Fort Riley, which was right next door to where Nikki and Nicholas lived. So I used to always pick him up and take him with me. And he would actually get to fly the simulators and shoot the guns from the Cobras and the Apaches and the CH-47s. And it was a perfect fit for him because he's a gamer.
Right.
And that's all simulation is. It's a big adult toy for us aviators that don't have to go out and get shot at. You can go fly a simulator and get the same type of training. But I could just never get him convinced to go. And I recommend military service is the first thing out of my mouth for anybody that's lost and needs to find a home.
Now, you obviously have a positive, view on, the military, as well as you should. But what would you consider the hardest part about military life compared to civilian life for people that are concerned about, the difficulties past boot camp when they're actually into it day to day?
I think initially in any school that I went to in the military, the hardest part was the physical part. And not that I was 19 when I went in. I thought I was pretty well physically fit. But some of the regimens that they have you go through as a soldier are not something that you're familiar with as a civil guy. Yeah, we all know what push-ups and sit-ups are. And we all consider, yeah, I can run 2 miles, no big deal. Well, try to do the sit-ups and push-ups and a 2-mile run with a 40-pound pack on your back.
Right.
There's a difference there. So of all the things, I was never ever afraid of what I could learn or what I could do. It was just being to get physically fit to do that. And not only by yourself, but as a group. You had to learn to rely on everybody that was in your group. And that's something that I never did in school. I never did when I was in the civil sector. It was all about me. So learning, and the skills aren't hard. They just take dedication. And I didn't find anything in the military that I couldn't overcome. I just had to set my mind to it. And there is nothing that would shy me away from going back in now if they'd ask me again, other than the physical training would probably be the hardest part one more time.
Probably a little bit different than it was when you were 19, right?
No doubt. And so much of it has changed. The physical requirements are even different now. You had to watch your weight, you had to take pictures, you had specific things that you had to do. And each one of them is a mark to climb the ladder of success. So yeah, it's, if I had it all to do over again, I'd have went as an aviation pilot earlier.
Interesting.
But other than that, nothing. I recommend it to anybody that's looking for a great lifestyle.
Now, you were in the Army for a while, right? So you had a
A
career.
little over almost 26 and a half years, yeah.
Right. And so in the beginning, when you joined, you obviously didn't have a family, a growing family of your own. But then, partly through that, you did. So my main question is, was it more difficult to be in the Army when you had a family compared to when you were 19? And what were those difficulties, if you could point them out? Specifically, I asked the question because, for my career, obviously I have a growing family of my own. And so that's kind of why, trying to figure out, obviously when I was 18, 19, I would have loved to make the decision, would have been a lot easier. Now I have, other ones, to think about.
I get it. The support groups in the military are phenomenal, particularly for young soldiers with families that go in. Excuse me. The hardest thing that I had to overcome, of course, we're talking, it was the 60s. It was the late 60s now. When I first joined the Army as a private going to flight school, I got $90 a month. There's no way in hell you can raise a family on that kind of money. The adjustments over the last 30, 40 years have really made a change to that. So the government is cognizant of people that join the military. Not only that, there's special compensation if you come in with a family, but there's so much support for families that I never got in the civil sector. And you can always, before you sign on the dotted line, you know exactly what your money is going to be when you join. And it's unfortunate that more people don't see that and realize it, but the support groups are unending in the military. Whenever your grandmother and I got to California, she actually had to go to work, and she was selling Avon products for a while just so we could make ends meet. But we never had to worry about a place to stay because the government supplied that for me. We never had to worry about not having food on the table because they gave you a substance for that. And it changes everywhere you go based on what the economy's like. So it's everything I can talk about the military is a positive experience. It's there's nothing now that I can even put my finger on that would deter me from having my own children, if I had any left, joining the military, because the money is considerably better than it was when I was there. Of course, all things change, but right now, at least we're a free country. And yeah, no, it's I can't even think of anything that was actually uncomfortable for me in the military. The moves maybe are difficult. If I could point out, we probably moved 6 or 8 times. And of course, packing up all your stuff and moving it to another country and is a bit unnerving, probably more so for the spouse than it is for the soldier, because, well, you do get the time off to do it. And once that's all set, the military gives you time to go find a home, and it's all, I mean, it's just too easy. It's just the longevities of the move. I mean, my example would be I left Fort Eustis, excuse me, Fort Riley, Kansas, and was stationed to Germany. Well, they told me we didn't have home. There was no housing in Germany. So they wanted to know where I wanted to move my family. So at that time I was married to my second wife, and her family was in San Antonio, Texas. So the government literally moved her to live with her family until government housing became available in Greece. So the options that the military offers that most companies that are civilian sector wouldn't. It's they make it just as easy as they can on the soldier and their families. Family is always a consideration.
And it's actually a perfect transition to what is technically my final question for the recorded interview, which is going to be something that a lot of people may be interested in. What places have you lived in during your time in the military?
Oh, wow. I had some pretty good assignments. Of course, as a young soldier, when I first come in, once I got out of the aviation schooling, I had volunteered for Vietnam. So I spent a couple of years there, came back. They gave me 30 days vacation between tours. It's the first time I can remember my mother cried when I told her I was going back to Vietnam. But once that was over, after 2 years of that, I was ready for a break. I mean, it was there was some stress associated with being in a war zone, but when I came back here and realized that I didn't really like the civil sector at that point in time, and it changes a little bit through time anyway. It's different for you than it was when I was your age, but so then we went from Kansas to California. I loved Fort Ord. It was a great assignment. I flew medical evacuation helicopters there as a crew member. And then I got the assignment to Greece. So we went to Greece for 3 years, 29 months actually. Then Fort Rucker, Alabama. From Fort Rucker, Alabama, out of school, they sent me to Fort Riley. From Fort Riley, I volunteered to go. I wanted to get out of Kansas, so I told them I wanted to put my name on the volunteer list. Well, lucky for me, it was Korea. Well, Korea was what's called a non-accompanied tour, which means I couldn't take my family with me. So the family got to stay in Kansas when I went to Korea, And then when I came back, obviously the next assignment was right back to Fort Riley again, which I wasn't happy about, but at least I knew the territory, right? The farm was just, 20 minutes down the road flying a helicopter. So
Right.
I got to fly to the farm quite a bit and land a helicopter there in my hometown and go have lunch with my friends. And it was really, the assignment wasn't that bad. It's just that I wanted to be someplace besides Kansas.
Right.
And from there, I went to Fort Eustis, Virginia. From Fort Eustis, Virginia, I went to Germany for a year. The drawdown hit Germany, and they told us to go look for an assignment someplace else because we were supposed to be there for a 3-year tour, and we were there 1 year. But I did manage to get an assignment to Sydney, Australia, whenever the drawdown had hit. And we were so looking forward to spending 3 years in Sydney, Australia. 2 weeks before we were due to DEROS, which is end your one assignment and start another one, they called me to the order room and said, hey, your assignment has been terminated in Australia because you have too much rank to accept the position. So the way the military did it back there, you could go up 2, but you could only go down 1. And they had reduced the rank so high that my rank was too high to accept the position. So then they sent me back to Fort Eustis, and from Fort Riley. Fort Riley, I had an assignment in Honduras for a few months. We started a airfield there, and I flew a medevac helicopter for them out of Riley. That was the year that my uncle had died. We were in California, and it's also whenever my second wife and I had our first child. So Deanna was only 30 days old when they sent me to Honduras for 3 months.
Wow.
And it was something that we spoke about. They don't always do that. They pull the families in quite a bit and talk about it. But my wife was actually not too much worried about me not being there because the military has such a support group. And she was also an aviator for a while. And so the flying assignment in Korea and Honduras are the absolute favorite assignments that I had in 26 years.
Really?
Yeah. They were all good when I was flying. I can't, again, some assignments are better than others. Korea was constant flying. Honduras was the prettiest country I'd seen from the air. And it was, and I got to do a myriad of things there, not only flying medevac, but I actually got to play dentist a couple of times because we would land on mountain villages and they just tell you, go out and pull the teeth that you can pull the teeth. And it was just, it was really bizarre, but it was a very fruitful and awesome experience my whole life. It didn't matter where I went. Of course, it's like anything else. You can make it what it is, but I used to volunteer to fly in every assignment that I ever went to because that's what I was there for. Some people don't do that. Some people would just as soon sit in the orderly room or in the operations and direct, where I was more of a put me behind the stick. Either play me or trade me, Captain. But I haven't, there's no assignment that I can say that I didn't really like. I just didn't like being in Kansas because that's where I grew up.
And now afterwards, you used your military experience to kind of continue the same similar path, right, in the civilian world.
I most certainly did.
Mind explaining that a little bit?
Yeah, so my last assignment was in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was working for the 2nd Army Aviation Resource Management Team. So, excuse me, they assigned me and a couple of other guys an area to cover. My area was southeastern United States, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. So I got to visit every one of those places twice a year. So, I mean, it's hard to say you hate an assignment when you get to go to places like Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, right?
Right.
And I could actually, even though it was temporary duty and travel, I could actually take my spouse with me. So she got to go with us. We went to the Virgin Islands, we went to Puerto Rico together, we went to Louisiana together. So there was a lot of things that I got to do, even though I was on assignment. She traveled as a civilian, but she could still stay with me in my hotel room or whatever. So they make it just as comfortable as possible. The assignment while I was in Atlanta, Georgia, I had friends that I had met and worked with in the military called me on the phone one day and said, "Hey, we have an assignment here as a quality control manager and a inspector, configuration manager, and we want to know if you would like to interview for the job." So I talked it over with the spouse and I called him back, and this was on like a Thursday. So we left Friday, drove to Orlando, Florida, which was about 6 hours out of Atlanta. Spent the whole weekend doing the Disney thing, the touristy things, and I got an interview that Friday night. And the gentleman that interviewed me was a retired colonel from the Army, and it was in a company that did simulation for the Army. And it was all aviation products, and we did Air Force and Navy as well, though. So I did the interview. When we finished the weekend, went home on a Sunday night, and Monday morning when I got to the office, I had a hire letter on my computer. It took 48 hours for them to interview me and ask me if I'd hire. Well, then it was time to make a decision to retire, and that's when I did it. I was already had a job waiting for me when I got out. So we packed up. It took about 3 weeks to get everything finished for the Army and get the household goods shipped, and we moved to Florida in November of '93.
Wow.
It was quite simple, actually, you know.
Yeah. All planned out.
And I've been here ever since.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. You've been there ever since, so.
Yeah. Well, I used to tell people would ask me where I was going to go when I retired. And I said, well, you know what? I spent my whole life in Kansas and I hated the snow and the wind. I think I'm just going to pick up a snow shovel and walk south. And the first guy that asked me, what the hell is that? I'm staying. So I wound up doing pretty good. Florida's it.
Yep, Florida's it. You don't get much snow there.
Thank goodness. I can go to snow. I just as soon it don't come to me.
Right. Well, those are pretty much all my questions for the recorded part of the interview. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I could help.
Yeah, absolutely. I really do appreciate your time participating in the interview and sharing your experiences.
You know, right now it's I can't tell you how difficult it is to get in the military. My assumption is it's probably not too bad because there's not a lot out here in the civil sector you get hired for right now. I mean, with the virus that we've got out here and the pandemic that's been floating around for over a year, if the military is hiring, man, that's a job that I would never tell anybody to turn down. At least explore the options, right? Because it made me who I am today.
That's good. You're a pretty good man, so
I appreciate that. Although there's probably some that would argue that point.
Well, you can't make everybody happy, so
ain't that the truth?
But I just wanted to end this by just saying thank you for your service again. I want to make that very clear because I appreciate everything that you've done.